I heard the key turn in the lock with a satisfying click, signaling my entry into our newly built home. Yet the scene that unfolded was far from welcoming. In the center of our living room stood Daniel, my husband of 34 years. His arms were crossed, and a self-satisfied smirk curved his lips. "This house is mine, Natalie," he declared, his voice chillingly devoid of the affection it once held. "I'm going to live here with my parents. If that doesn't sit well with you, you're free to leave." Frozen in place, I processed his words, which seemed to ricochet through my mind. "What are you talking about, Daniel?" My voice was a mere whisper, a stark contrast to the inner turmoil I felt. "He handed me a business card for a divorce attorney. Thought you might need this," he said with a smug tone that sent waves of nausea through me. I steadied myself against the marble countertop as the room seemed to spin. "Why are you doing this?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. Daniel shrugged, his indifference cutting deep. "You never really fit in with us, Natalie. It's better this way." Memories of trying to blend into his family, enduring his mother's critical eyes and his father's dismissive attitude, flooded back to me. I had been merely a pawn in their games. "You said we were a team," I accused, my voice gaining strength as Daniel laughed dismissively. "We were until I didn't need you anymore." His words struck me like a physical blow. All the love, sacrifices, and shared dreams meant nothing to him now. A rage began to build within me, a fiery resolve to not let this betrayal define me. "You won't get away with this," I vowed, my eyes fiercely locked onto his. Daniel's smirk faltered, doubt flickering across his face. "What can you possibly do, Natalie?" "You'll see," I said, my voice now steady. "Karma has a way of coming back around." I turned and walked out, the business card crumpling in my fist. As I stepped into the sunlight, a weight lifted from my shoulders, free from his manipulative grip. I was determined to ensure he regretted every hurtful word, every deceitful action. Although I didn't know how or when, one thing was clear. Daniel would pay for his deeds, and I would be the one to collect. Settling into a quiet corner of a bustling coffee shop, I sat with a cup of latte growing cold before me. Memories of meeting Daniel at a mutual friend's party came flooding back. He was charming, slightly awkward, and seemed sincere. We connected over our love for classic rock and Italian cuisine. At that moment, I thought I had found someone who valued family and simplicity. But as our relationship progressed, the truth became painfully clear. As I started living with Daniel, the charming facade he had presented began to crumble, revealing his true nature. The real Daniel emerged, a man who nonchalantly left his dirty laundry scattered across our bedroom for days. "Why make such a fuss? It's just clothes," he would say dismissively, brushing off my concerns. His habits grated on me, but it was his indifference that stung the most. He never prioritized my comfort, always placing his own convenience above our harmony. Every attempt I made to address these issues was met with evasion. "My mom never complained about doing these things for me," he would retort. Visits to Daniel's parents' home were eye-opening. His father, much like Daniel, showed a blatant disregard for others, encroaching on personal spaces without a second thought. "What's the big deal?" He'd chuckle when I voiced my discomfort. His mother, though seeming gentle, would hastily clean up after the men, her actions reinforcing their careless behavior. In that household, Daniel's habits were not flaws, they were the norm. I clung to the hope that love would smooth out his rough edges. But as time passed, my hope turned to disillusionment. The man I fell in love with was just a facade, and beneath it lay someone who cared for nothing but his own desires. The stark contrast between the Daniel I knew and the one I lived with was jarring. I felt deceived, trapped in a relationship that was more of a convenience for him than a partnership. "You're always making a big deal out of nothing, Natalie," Daniel would say during our arguments, his words laced with disdain. And now, his ultimate betrayal, the house that was supposed to be our dream, our future, was merely another pawn in his selfish game. A fire ignited within me, fueled by every belittling comment and dismissive gesture. Daniel had shown his true colors, and it was time for me to show mine. He thought he could discard me like one of his dirty shirts, but I wasn't going to be tossed aside so easily. I was ready to fight back, not just for myself, but for every moment I spent believing in a lie. I stood up, leaving the cold latte behind. It was time to plot my next move, to turn the tables on Daniel. He thought he had won, but the game had just begun. Standing outside the small but cozy space that was now my nail salon, I looked up at the sign above the door, Natalie's Elegance. It symbolized a fresh start, a declaration of my newfound independence. The early days were tough. I worked tirelessly, my hands often aching from the meticulous artistry my job demanded. But with each stroke of polish and each satisfied customer, I rebuilt the confidence Daniel had tried to shatter. "Your work is incredible," they would say, and with each compliment, I grew stronger, more determined to thrive and prove that I could rise from the ashes of deception and betrayal. One afternoon, as I meticulously painted the nails of one of my regular customers, Mrs. James, she remarked, "Natalie, you've got a real gift." Her words soothed my weary soul like a soothing balm. Starting from scratch, armed with nothing but my skills and unwavering determination, I had built something worthwhile. Daniel thought he had stripped me of everything, but he was gravely mistaken. He had grossly underestimated my resilience. As my business flourished, so did my resolve. I wasn't merely going to survive. I was determined to thrive. Ensuring that Daniel faced the consequences of his actions became part of my mission. One evening, as I balanced my accounts, a satisfied smile crossed my face. My salon was not just getting by, it was prospering. I was on the verge of achieving financial independence, a stark contrast to the predicament Daniel found himself in. I recalled Daniel's arrogance and the smug look on his face when he handed me the divorce attorney's card. So sure of his future in that house. Unbeknownst to him, the financial burdens were piling up. Through mutual friends, I learned that Daniel was struggling with higher than expected mortgage payments. Furthermore, his parents, far from being the financial safety net he had anticipated, were adding to his woes. A plan began to crystallize in my mind. Daniel had always been poor at managing his finances, often relying on others to bail him out. This time, however, there would be no rescue, and I was going to make sure of that. As I polished the nails of my next client, a mischievous smile played on my lips. "Is everything all right, Natalie?" my client inquired, noticing my expression. "Better than all right," I replied. "I'm just enjoying the thought of comma in action." In my mind's eye, I visualized Daniel floundering under the weight of his poor choices, his dreams collapsing like the walls of the house he had taken from me. But this was just the beginning. I wasn't going to simply sit back and watch. I was going to actively shape his downfall. And with every step of his descent, I would rise. He had built his future on lies and deceit, and it was only a matter of time before it all came crashing down. I, Natalie, would be there to witness it. My hands clean, my conscience clear. The evening silence was broken by the ringing of my phone. Glancing at the caller ID, I saw it was Daniel. A wave of satisfaction washed over me. This was the moment I had been preparing for. "Hello, Daniel," I said, my voice calm and composed. "Natalie, you need to help me," he blurted out, his voice tinged with panic. The desperation in his tone was music to my ears. Why indeed would I help the man who had tried to ruin me? Feigning ignorance, I asked, "What's the problem, Daniel?" "It's the house, Natalie. I can't afford the mortgage anymore, and the bank is threatening to foreclose," he confessed. I nearly chuckled at the irony. Daniel, once so proud of his financial control and stability, was now overwhelmed by his own reckless decisions. "You always seem so confident about your finances, Daniel. What happened?" I prodded, unable to resist the urge to twist the knife just a bit deeper. I underestimated the costs, and my parents. "They're draining me. I can't keep up with everything," he stammered. I could almost see him now, the once arrogant man crumbling under the harsh reality. "That sounds like a tough situation," I replied, my voice using feigned sympathy. "Natalie, please. You always managed our finances better. I need you. I need your help," he pleaded, his voice pathetic and desperate. It filled me with a profound sense of power. This was the man who had thought he could discard me like yesterday's news, and now he was begging for my assistance. "Daniel, you made your choice," I said firmly. "You chose that house over our marriage. You chose your comfort over our partnership. Why should I bail you out now?" There was a pause on the line, and I could almost hear him scrambling to come up with a convincing reason. "I'll do anything, Natalie. Please, I'm begging you." The word begging hung in the air, a sweet vindication for all the hurt and betrayal he had caused me. "I'm sorry, Daniel, but you're on your own this time. Maybe it's time you learn to clean up your own mess," I said, a smirk forming on my lips. I hung up the phone before he could respond. A wave of exhilaration washed over me. Daniel was finally experiencing the consequences of his actions, and I had front row seats to the spectacle. As I sat there, basking in the glow of my small victory, I knew this was only the beginning. Daniel's downfall was inevitable, and I was going to make sure he felt every bit of the pain he had inflicted on me. His house of cards was falling, and I wasn't going to lift a finger to stop it. After all, karma has a way of coming full circle. And for Daniel, it was just getting started. I thought you might, come to your rescue after everything you've done. I cut him off. The satisfaction of seeing him like this was indescribable. Daniel took a step forward, desperation clear in his eyes. Natalie, please. I was wrong. I see that now. I need you. I scrutinized him. Really looked at the man I had once loved. The man with whom I had built dreams. He had betrayed me without a second thought. No, Daniel, you don't need me. You need to take responsibility for your actions. You need to face the consequences of your choices, I told him, my voice resolute. I could see the dawning realization, the understanding that there was no way out, that he had reached the end of the road. I'm sorry, Natalie. Truly, I am, he said, his apology too little, too late. I had moved on. Built a life that was mine alone, a life where he had no place. Goodbye, Daniel. I wish you the best. But this is where our paths diverge for good. He stood there for a moment, looking lost and broken, then turned and walked away. As the door closed behind him, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had faced my past and emerged stronger. Daniel's downfall was his own doing. And while I had played my part in it, it was time to let go and focus on my future. Turning back to my clients with a smile, I was Natalie, the owner of a successful salon, a woman who had overcome betrayal and emerged victorious. My past with Daniel was just that, the past. My future was bright, and it was all mine. After the salon closed for the day, I sat alone, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The walls, once bare, now adorned with accolades and tokens of appreciation from clients, were a testament to my hard work and resilience. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. I hesitated, then stood to answer it. To my surprise, it was Mrs. George, Daniel's mother. Her voice, once commanding and confident, was now timid, a stark contrast to the domineering woman I remembered. Natalie, may I come in? She asked, her voice soft. I nodded, curiosity piqued. Of course, Mrs. George. What brings you here? She took a seat, her hands ringing in her lap, signaling the beginning of a conversation I hadn't anticipated. I wanted to apologize, Natalie, for everything. Mrs. George's words took me by surprise. This was the woman who had staunchly sided with Daniel, who had criticized me for not conforming to their way of life. Why now? I asked, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. She sighed, a look of defeat etching her features. Since you left, everything has fallen apart. Daniel lost the house, and we're struggling to make ends meet. I see now how wrong we were, how we treated you. There was a part of me that wanted to revel in her misery, to savor the taste of vindication. But looking at her, a broken woman, I realized that my true victory wasn't in their downfall, but in my own ascent. Mrs. George, I've moved on from that part of my life. What happened with Daniel was unfortunate, but it led me to where I am today, I responded. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, truly sorry. You didn't deserve any of it, she continued. I offered her a small smile. Thank you for saying that. I hope things get better for you and your family. As she left, I felt a wave of closure wash over me. The chapter of my life that included Daniel and his family was officially closed. I turned to gaze at my salon, my sanctuary. It was more than a business. It symbolized my strength, my independence, and my ability to overcome adversity. I had not only survived Daniel's betrayal, but had thrived. And in doing so, I had learned the most valuable lesson of all, that the best revenge is living well. Living well was exactly what I intended to do.